When I was 20 years old, so 6 years ago, I worked as a delivery girl for a pretty popular pizzeria in my area. Initially, I worked the late morning to mid afternoon shift, but when the guy who delivered for the night shift ended up getting fired due to him losing his license because of a DUI, I was placed on the night shift. I really didn't want this shift because you never know if people who order late at night actually want a pizza or if they have other intentions in mind. Unfortunately, my boss was a jerk and essentially told me if I wasn't willing to work the night shift, I was fired. I wasn't exactly in a position where I could be out of work, albeit temporarily, so I reluctantly worked the shift. The first month of this shift went by without any issues until I had to deliver a pizza to a house that just barely made our delivery radius. I punched it in on my GPS, and the house was located in a pretty suburban part of the city. I arrived and it's about 11 p.m. The block was extremely quiet, decently lit, and mostly littered with modern townhouses, but the house I delivered to was a duplex. I ring the doorbell and wait for about 30 seconds. No answer. I ring again and wait another 30 seconds. Still no answer. I'm standing there getting pretty nervous that something's about to go down, but thankfully a man opens the door. He looks like he was in his late 40s. He's pretty tall, maybe a little over 6 foot, and he was very skinny. I tell him his pizza is here, and he just stands there staring at me. I ask him if he's okay, and he responded by saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry. I got off work not too long ago and I'm zoning out a bit." Fair enough, I suppose. He hands me the money, and I hand him the pizza, and as I'm making change, he says, "You're really beautiful, you know that?" Not really thinking too much into it, I thank him for the compliment and give him his change. I said good night, and he did too. I walk back to my car and finish my deliveries for the night. A few days later, I get a delivery order to the same place. I head over there around the same time as last time and ring the doorbell. He answered the door very excited and said, "Hey, it's you again. How are you?" I told him I was tired and can't wait to get home, to which he chuckled and said, "I know that feeling pretty well." As he was pulling out his wallet and as he's counting his money, he asked me what my name is. Being kinda tired at this point and not really thinking straight, I stupidly tell him my name. As I'm making his change, he asked if he could have my number as he'd love to hang out with someone as gorgeous as I am. Whoa, buddy, pump the brakes. I've literally only met this guy like twice to deliver a pizza. I had no idea who this guy was, and I'm positive he barely knew who I was as well. Another thing to mention is I look way younger than I am at the time, and I was told by numerous people that I still looked like I was 15, and I'm hoping he thought differently and wasn't hitting on what he thought was a teenager. I'm just standing there awkwardly for a few seconds before I muster out, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He gets upset and says, "Oh, okay, I see." We stand there in silence before I tell him to have a good night and walk back to my car. He says nothing and still stands at the doorway staring at me until he finally went back inside once I started my car. I got a pretty creepy vibe from this guy and even brought it up to my coworkers, and they agreed it was pretty creepy, except for my boss, who overheard everything and exclaimed that I was making up stories and tried having game sympathy for taking the shift. A week later, as I'm working the night shift and we get an order from the same guy again, this is when things really take a turn. I arrive at the house at around 10:30 p.m. and keep in mind that from my perspective on the road, it didn't look like a single light was on in the house. I get out of my car and I'm walking to the front door with the pizza box in my arms. As I'm approaching the door, it quickly swings open to reveal the man. Except this time he was wearing a suit and I jumped back. He laughed and said, "Sorry if I scared you. I saw you out the window and figured I would just open the door now so you wouldn't have to ring the bell." I was getting scared because, as I mentioned before, there were no lights on in the house, so was he just sitting in the dark this whole time? And if so, why? I nervously laughed and said it's okay. He asked me if I'd liked his suit, to which I said yes. He then asked me, "Would you like to go on a date with me tonight?" What the heck? I once again tell him I have a boyfriend, to which he chuckles, gets close to me and says, Honey, there's no way a girl your age is in a serious relationship. If you go on a date with me, I show you how a real man treats a girl. He grabs the pizza box from me and throws it to the side and grabs me by my arms hard. I'm officially afraid at this point and trying not to cry from the fear that was overwhelming me. I start pleading with him, "Dude, please, I just want to go home. I don't want to go on a date tonight." He just stares at me with the most sinister look I've seen on someone's face and says, "I don't care, get inside now, we're gonna have a good time." He starts pulling on me to get me in the house, and I'm trying to resist as hard as I can. After a bit of struggle, he lets go on one of my arms and starts grabbing something out of his pocket, to which I presume was a knife. I did something that to this day I am still thankful worked as he was doing that. I used my free arm to punch him as hard as I could in his stomach. This stunned him for a few seconds, and he loosened his grip on me, allowing me to break free. I quickly run to my car, and as I get in, he runs at me and tries pulling me out of the car, holding the knife in the other arm, and even yells, "Why are you making this so difficult?" I grab a half-empty soda bottle I had in the cup holder and throw it, and luckily it hits him on the head and he lets me go. I slam the door, and then all of a sudden, he jumps right on the hood of my car and starts scratching and banging on my windshield with his knife. I put the car in reverse and start backing out as fast as I can. He kept on the hood of my car, and then I tried slamming on the gas to get away from that sick bastard. In my panic state, I drove a couple blocks down the street and kept making turn after turn onto the other side blocks as I feared I was being followed. Eventually, I reached a red light and I slammed on the brakes and just sat at the intersection, frozen from what had just happened. I began crying and violently shaking as I was sitting there, and it dawned on me that I came so close to losing my life, and I couldn't help but feel like I shouldn't have been alive. Once the light turned green and I pulled over to the side, I just sat there crying. Eventually, I got the energy to drive back to the pizzeria, and almost immediately after I walked in, my coworkers knew that something was wrong after seeing me. I practically broke down in front of him, and everyone else came to the front, wondering what was going on. I fought my tears and explained everything that had just happened. My coworker comforted me, and my boss surprised me and actually took me into his office, apologizing profusely for what had happened and for putting me on the night shift. He handed me the phone to call the cops. They arrived at the store and I gave them my statement, as well as taking pictures of any marks on myself and scratches from the car as of the encounter as evidence. My coworker followed me as I drove home, and I collapsed on my bed, and strangely enough, I managed to fall asleep, and I quit my job the next day. As far as the psycho goes, 2 days later, I received an update from the police. I learned that he had been in and out of jail constantly, at first for robberies and assaults, but later on it was for sex crimes. He had been released from jail about 5 months before this encounter for having sex with a minor. When they arrived at the house, he was long gone, and his family had no idea where he ran off to, but the police insisted they would find him. And indeed they did, albeit not alive. The police contacted me and updated me on the case. Apparently, he fled to another city nearby and attempted to kidnap a teenager walking alone late at night on the street. Luckily, someone happened to be looking out the window at the right time, called the cops, and the police caught him trying to force her into his car. He manages to flee and the police chase after him. He blew a red light near a busy boulevard, and a van slammed on the right side of the driver's side of his car. By some sort of miracle, the driver of the van only sustained minor injuries, while the psycho succumbed to his wounds long before the ambulance even arrived. I thank the officers for everything they did and for informing me, and I walked out of the station. As I walked down the street and I lit up a cigarette, and I'm taking in everything I'd just been told. I don't wish death on people, but after hearing about his death I feel relieved. Who knows where I would be if he managed to pull me into his house.